Beneath the Surface. Chapter 1. The Quiet Town. Vila do Mar was a quiet town by the sea. It was small, with only a few hundred people living there. The streets were made of stone and curved gently between white houses with red roofs. The windows had blue shutters, and flowers grew in pots outside the doors. The town was peaceful, and the sound of the ocean was always nearby. Waves touched the shore gently, and fishing boats moved slowly in and out of the harbor. Life in Vila do Mar was simple. People woke early, worked with their hands, and rested when the sun went down. Elise Bauer had arrived 2 years earlier. She came from Germany, looking for a place where she could live quietly and work near the sea. She was 29 years old, strong, focused, and curious. She had studied marine biology and archaeology, but she didn't want to work in a big city or a busy lab. She wanted to be close to the water. Vila do Mar felt like the right place. It was quiet, but not empty. It had history, but not noise. Elise rented a small house near the harbor. It had 1 bedroom, a kitchen, and a small garden with lemon trees. She kept her diving gear in a wooden shed behind the house. Each morning, Elise walked to the diving center where she worked. She taught tourists how to dive and helped locals repair their equipment. She was patient and kind, but she didn't talk much about herself. People liked her, but they didn't know her well. In the afternoons, when her work was done, she often went diving alone. She explored the underwater cliffs and caves near the town. She didn't look for treasure. She looked for stories. She believed that the sea kept secrets, and she wanted to find them. The underwater world near Vila do Mar was beautiful. The water was clear, and the rocks were full of life. Fish swam in groups, and sea plants moved with the current. Elise felt calm when she was below the surface. She liked the silence, the slow movement, and the feeling of being far from everything. She often stayed underwater for hours, taking notes and photos. She kept a journal where she wrote about the shapes of the rocks, the colors of the fish, and the strange objects she sometimes found buried in the sand. Elise had a habit of walking through the town at night. She liked to watch the stars and listen to the waves. She often passed the old lighthouse, which stood at the edge of the cliffs. It was no longer used, but it still lit up on some nights. The lighthouse had stories, and Elise wanted to learn them. She believed that every place had a past, and sometimes that past was hidden. Vila do Mar was peaceful, but Elise felt that something was waiting to be found. Something beneath the surface. She didn't know what it was. Maybe it was a forgotten ruin, or an old shipwreck, or something even older. She didn't tell anyone about her thoughts. She kept them in her journal, along with sketches and maps. She didn't want to sound strange. She just wanted to understand. Elise was not looking for fame or money. She was looking for meaning. She believed that the sea could teach her something important. The people in Vila do Mar lived simple lives. They fished, cooked, and cared for their families. They didn't ask many questions. They respected the ocean, but they didn't explore it. Elise was different. She wanted to go deeper. She wanted to know what was hidden. She didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. The town was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. She felt that something was close. Something old. Something waiting. And so, each day, Elise continued her routine. She taught diving, explored the sea, and listened to the silence. She didn't know what she would find, but she believed that the answers were out there, beneath the waves, beneath the surface. Chapter 2. The Discovery. The morning sun rose slowly over Vila do Mar. The sky was pale blue, and the sea looked calm and wide. Elise Bauer stood near the harbor with her diving partner, Marco. He was a local fisherman in his 30s who had learned to dive with Elise. He was strong, quiet, and trusted the ocean. Elise liked diving with him because he respected the water and never rushed. That day, they planned to explore a deep trench near the old lighthouse. Elise had studied the area before and believed it might hide something unusual. They prepared their gear carefully. Elise checked her oxygen tank, mask, and underwater camera. Marco adjusted his fins and flashlight. They entered the water slowly, letting their bodies sink below the surface. The sea was clear, and the current was gentle. Fish swam around them, and the light from above made soft patterns on the rocks. They moved deeper, following the edge of the trench. The water grew darker, but Elise felt calm. She had been diving for many years and trusted her instincts. As they reached the bottom of the trench, Elise noticed something strange. The rocks were not smooth like usual. Some had straight lines and sharp corners. She swam closer and brushed away sand with her hand. Underneath, she saw carvings. The symbols were not letters or numbers. They looked like spirals, triangles, and waves. Elise had never seen anything like them. She took out her camera and took several photos. Marco helped her clear more sand, and together they found broken pottery pieces. The shapes were simple, but the designs were detailed. Some had small dots and lines around the edges. Near the pottery, Elise found a small stone tablet. It was flat and heavy, with markings carved into the surface. The symbols were similar to the ones on the rocks. She held the tablet carefully and placed it in her bag. She didn't want to damage it. Her heart beat faster. She knew this was not normal. These objects were old, maybe very old. They didn't match anything she had seen in books or museums. She felt excited, but also unsure. What civilization had made these? Why were they underwater? What had happened to them? They stayed in the trench for another hour, searching slowly. They didn't find more artifacts, but Elise marked the location on her map. She wanted to return later and explore more. When they reached the surface, the sun was higher, and the town looked quiet as usual. Elise and Marco climbed onto the boat and removed their gear. Elise opened her bag and looked at the tablet again. The carvings were clear, but the meaning was hidden. She didn't know how to read them, but she felt they were important. Back at her house, Elise cleaned the tablet gently and placed it on her desk. She compared the symbols to ones in her books, but nothing matched. She wrote notes in her journal and printed the photos. She planned to visit a local historian the next day. She needed help to understand what she had found. The discovery felt big, but she didn't want to rush. She wanted to learn slowly and carefully. That evening, Elise sat in her garden and listened to the sea. The waves moved softly, but her thoughts were loud. She thought about the carvings, the pottery, and the tablet. She thought about the trench and the silence below. She felt that something was waiting to be uncovered. Not just objects, but a story. A forgotten story that had slept under the water for many years. She didn't know what it was yet, but she was ready to find out. Chapter 3. The Warning. Elise walked through the quiet streets of Villa do Mar with the stone tablet wrapped in cloth. She held it carefully in her hands. The morning was warm, and the sea breeze moved gently through the town. She was on her way to visit Dr. Almeida, a local historian who lived near the old church. He was known for his knowledge of ancient cultures and forgotten places. He had studied ruins across Portugal and had written books about early settlements along the coast. Elise trusted him. She hoped he could help her understand what she had found. Dr. Almeida was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. His house was filled with books, maps, and old objects. Elise placed the tablet on his desk, and he looked at it with great interest. He didn't speak right away. He cleaned his glasses, turned on a lamp, and studied the markings closely. After a long pause, he said the symbols were not Roman, not Moorish, and not from any known Portuguese culture. He believed they might belong to a forgotten civilization that lived along the coast before Roman times. A people who had left no written records, only stone and silence. He told Elise that such discoveries were rare and important, but he also gave her a warning. He said that some ruins were sacred. They were places of ceremony, places of memory. Disturbing them could bring trouble, not just physical danger, but emotional and spiritual unrest. He had seen it before. People who entered sacred sites without respect often felt lost afterward. He advised Elise to be careful, to move slowly, to listen to the sea and to the silence. Elise thanked him and returned home. She sat in her garden and thought about his words. She didn't feel afraid, but she felt something new, a sense of responsibility. She knew she had found something special, something that needed care. But her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She wanted to know more. She wanted to see what else was hidden in the trench. The next morning, Elise prepared her gear and returned to the site alone. The sea was calm, and the light was soft. She entered the water and swam toward the trench. She moved slowly, watching the rocks and sand. She reached the same spot where she had found the tablet. She began to search again, brushing away layers of sand and small stones. After some time, she found a bronze mask buried under a flat rock. It was shaped like a human face, but the features were strange: long eyes, a wide mouth, and small symbols carved around the edges. The mask was heavy and cold. Elise placed it in her bag and continued searching. Nearby, she found a ring made of dark metal. It had a spiral symbol on top, and the band was thick and uneven. It looked handmade, but not recent. Then she saw something unusual: a sealed jar made of clay, hidden between two stones. It was covered in seaweed and dirt. She cleaned it gently and noticed that the lid was still closed. She brought it to the surface and opened it carefully at home. Inside was a scroll made of thin material, almost like dried leaves. It was too fragile to open fully. Elise placed it in a box and promised herself she would not damage it. She would ask Dr. Almeida to help. That evening, Elise sat in her room with the artifacts around her: the mask, the ring, the jar, and the scroll. She felt the weight of history pressing around her. These were not just objects. They were pieces of a forgotten story. A story that had slept under the sea for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. She didn't know what the story was yet, but she felt it growing inside her. She felt connected to something old, something deep, something important. She remembered Drive Almeida's warning. She didn't want to disturb the past. She wanted to understand it. She wanted to listen. She promised herself to move with care, to respect the silence, and to follow the truth wherever it led. The sea had given her a gift, and now it was her task to protect it. Chapter 4. The Storm. The news of Elise's discovery moved quickly through Vila do Mar. At first, only a few people knew about the tablet and the strange symbols. But soon, the story reached every corner of the town. People talked in the bakery, at the docks, and in the small cafe near the church. Some were curious and excited. They believed Elise had found something important, something that could bring attention to their quiet town. Others were worried. They said the sea had secrets, and those secrets should stay hidden. The fishermen were the first to notice changes. They said the water felt different. The waves were stronger, and the fish had disappeared from their usual places. Nets came back empty, and boats rocked harder than before. The older men blamed the weather, but the younger ones looked toward the trench. They believed the discovery had disturbed something below. They didn't speak loudly, but their eyes showed concern. The older women in town whispered about curses. They remembered stories from their childhood, tales of lost spirits and sacred places under the sea. They said the carvings were warnings, not decorations. They believed Elise had touched something ancient, something that should not be touched. They lit candles and placed flowers near the lighthouse. They didn't speak to Elise directly, but she felt their fear. Elise tried to stay calm. She continued her work, writing notes and studying the artifacts. She visited Drive Almeida again and showed him the bronze mask and the ring. He was impressed but also more serious than before. He reminded her to be careful, to respect the past. Elise listened, but her curiosity was strong. She wanted to return to the trench and search deeper. She felt that the story was not finished. But the sea had other plans. One night, the sky turned dark earlier than usual. The wind picked up, and the waves grew louder. Clouds moved fast, and the air smelled of salt and rain. People closed their windows and stayed inside. Elise watched from her garden as the storm arrived. Lightning flashed over the water, and thunder echoed through the hills. The sea rose quickly, crashing against the harbor walls. Boats were lifted and thrown. The lighthouse shook, and part of its roof broke away. Elise ran to the diving center the next morning. The damage was clear. The harbor was flooded, and the water had reached the streets. Her diving gear was gone. The shed behind her house was broken, and her maps were soaked. She felt a deep sadness. She walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down at the sea. The trench was no longer visible. Rocks had fallen, and sand had covered the area. The entrance was blocked. The ocean had closed its door. She felt helpless. The storm had taken more than tools and maps. It had taken her path forward. She sat near the lighthouse and watched the waves. They were calm again, but different. The sea looked quiet, but not peaceful. It looked like it was waiting. Elise thought about the warnings, the stories, and the silence. She didn't know if the storm was just nature or something more. But she knew she had to wait. She had to listen. Days passed, and the town began to clean the damage. People repaired boats and swept the streets. But the mood had changed. The excitement was gone. The whispers were louder. Elise stayed inside, reading her notes and looking at the photos. She didn't dive. She didn't search. She waited. She knew the sea would speak again, but only when it was ready. The storm had changed everything. It had reminded her that the ocean was not just water. It was history, power, and mystery. It could give, and it could take. Elise felt smaller, but also wiser. She didn't feel angry. She felt respectful. She had entered a world older than her, deeper than her, and now she had to earn its trust again. The ocean had closed its door. But Elise believed it was not locked. She just needed to find the right way to knock. Chapter 5. The Truth Below. After the storm, Elise felt lost but not defeated. The trench was buried, her diving gear was gone, and the sea had changed. But her curiosity remained strong. She believed the story was not finished. She wanted to find another way to reach the site. She spent days studying old maps and drawings. She looked at books in the library and notes from Dr. Almeida. She searched for clues in the landscape, in the rocks, and in the history of Vila do Mar. One morning, Elise found something interesting in a forgotten book. It showed a sketch of a cave entrance near the cliffs, not far from the lighthouse. The cave was small and hidden, and most people had forgotten about it. Elise decided to explore it. She asked Marco to help her. He was careful and loyal, and he trusted Elise's instincts. Together, they packed flashlights, ropes, and small tools. They walked along the cliffs until they found the entrance. It was covered with plants and stones, but still open. The cave was dark and narrow. The air was cool and smelled of salt and earth. Elise and Marco moved slowly, using their lights to guide the way. The tunnel was long and twisted. The walls were rough, and the floor was wet. They walked for many minutes until the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. The space was quiet and full of shadows. Elise looked around and felt something powerful. The walls were covered in carvings, symbols, shapes, and drawings. Some looked like waves, others like stars. There were animals, hands, and eyes. The carvings were old, but still clear. In the center of the chamber stood a stone statue. It was a woman holding a shell. Her face was calm, and her eyes were closed. Her dress flowed like water, and her feet touched the ground gently. Elise walked closer and felt a strong emotion. The statue was not just art. It was a message. It showed that the people who lived here long ago had worshipped the sea. They had seen it as a living force, not just a place for fishing or travel. They had respected it, feared it, and loved it. Elise remembered the artifacts she had found, the mask, the ring, the jar. She now understood they were not just objects. They were offerings, gifts to the sea, signs of connection. She thought about the scroll that Dr. Almeida had opened. It spoke of balance between land and water. It said that the sea must be treated with care, or it would respond with storms and silence. Elise realized that the town had forgotten this balance. People had taken from the sea without giving back. They had lost the respect that once existed. She stood in the chamber and felt the truth below. It was not just about history. It was about life. The carvings, the statue, the scroll, they all told the same story. A story of harmony, a story of warning. Elise felt small, but also part of something bigger. She knew she had a role to play. She had to share what she had learned. She had to help the town remember. Marco stood beside her, quiet and thoughtful. He didn't speak, but Elise saw understanding in his eyes. They stayed in the chamber for a long time, looking at the walls, feeling the silence. Then they returned to the surface, carrying the memory with them. Elise didn't feel afraid anymore. She felt ready, ready to tell the story, ready to protect the truth, ready to restore the balance. The cave had opened a new path, not just to the past, but to the future. Elise knew the sea would always be powerful, but now, she also knew it could be peaceful, if treated with respect. The truth below was clear, and now, it was her task to bring it to light. Chapter 6. The Future of Villa du Mar. Elise stood in front of the town hall with her journal in hand. The sun was warm, and the sea breeze moved gently through the square. People from Villa du Mar gathered around her. Some were curious, some were cautious, and some were simply quiet. Elise had spent many weeks preparing for this moment. She had written down everything she had learned, from the carvings in the cave to the meaning of the scroll. She didn't speak about gold or treasure. She didn't promise fame or money. She spoke about respect, about memory, and about the deep connection between the town and the sea. The mayor listened carefully. He was a thoughtful man who had lived in Villa du Mar his whole life. He remembered the old stories told by his grandparents. He remembered the quiet warnings from the fishermen and the strange silence after the storm. Elise's words touched something inside him. He understood that the discovery was not just about the past. It was about the future. He agreed to protect the site. He promised to build a small museum near the harbor, where people could learn about the ancient civilization and the balance it had kept with the sea. The town began to change slowly. The fishermen returned to the water, but they did so with new rituals. They placed small offerings near the lighthouse before each trip. They spoke softly to the waves and watched the sky with care. The sea responded. The waves became calmer, and the fish returned. The boats came back full, and the harbor felt alive again. People didn't talk about curses anymore. They talked about respect. They remembered that the sea was not just a place to work. It was a living force that needed care. Tourists started to visit Villa du Mar. They came to see the museum, the carvings, and the statue in the cave. They walked through the quiet streets and listened to the stories. But the town didn't become noisy or crowded. It stayed peaceful. The people of Villa du Mar didn't chase attention. They shared their history with care. They welcomed visitors, but they protected their silence. The museum was small, with soft lights and simple displays. Elise helped design it. She chose every word and every image with love. Elise continued to dive. She didn't search for new artifacts. She searched for understanding. She swam near the cliffs and listened to the water. She felt part of something larger. She didn't feel alone anymore. She felt connected, to the town, to the sea, and to the people who had lived there long ago. She kept writing in her journal, but now her words were different. They were not just notes. They were reflections. She had uncovered not just history, but a lesson. She spent time with children from the town, teaching them about the ocean and the carvings. She showed them how to dive and how to listen. She told them that the sea was not just deep. It was wise. It remembered everything. The children listened with wide eyes and open hearts. They didn't want to find treasure. They wanted to understand. Elise saw hope in their faces. She knew the future of Villa du Mar was safe. The statue in the cave remained untouched. People visited it with quiet steps and open minds. They didn't take photos. They stood in silence. They felt something they couldn't explain. Elise often returned there alone. She stood in front of the stone woman holding the shell and closed her eyes. She felt the past, the present, and the future all at once. She didn't need answers. She had found meaning. The town had changed, but not in loud ways. It had remembered its soul. It had found balance again. Elise had helped, but the real power came from the sea and the stories it carried. Beneath the surface, there was more than stone. There was memory, belief, and connection. Moral: sometimes the past is not lost. It waits beneath the surface, ready to teach us. When we listen to history with respect, we find more than facts. We find meaning. Elise didn't just discover a forgotten civilization. She helped a town remember its soul. True adventure is not only about finding something new. It's about understanding what was always there. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.